Welcome to The Explainer. So, today we're going to talk about the story behind one of the most recognizable figures in all of history, the Buddha. But here's the thing. The popular image that we all know, it hides a pretty wild story of extreme suffering and a truly radical discovery. I mean, you've seen this serene image, right? It's everywhere, in homes, gardens, temples, all over the world. But how many of us really know the incredible, and I mean grueling, story of the man who became the Buddha? Let me tell you, it's a journey that is a million miles away from the peaceful face we see today. So on one hand, you have this popular image, right? Plump, well-fed, suggests a life of perfect calm. But the reality of his journey? That's a whole different story. We're talking about unimaginable hardship. Before he was the Buddha, he was a prince who became an ascetic, pushing his body to the absolute limit until he was literally a faltering skeleton. That statue we all recognize? Well, that's just the final chapter. It completely leaves out the grueling story that came before. All right, to really get this, we've got to go back in time. We're talking about 2,500 years ago. Let's meet a young prince named Gautama. Now, this is way before he was known as the Buddha, which, by the way, just means the enlightened one. At this point, he was just a man, totally wrestling with the world he saw around him. So, at just 29 years old, he's completely haunted by all the suffering he sees in the world. And he makes this absolutely radical decision. He walks out. In the middle of the night, leaving behind his palace, his wife, his brand new baby son. I mean, just think about that. For the next 6 years, he becomes this wandering ascetic, practicing the most intense forms of self-denial you can imagine. He believed that if he could just conquer his body, he'd find the ultimate truth. And this whole quest, it ends with him literally starving himself to the point of total collapse. People said his will was made of iron. And you can see why. He didn't just try this lifestyle. He became known as the Prince of Ascetics. His fame for this extreme dedication spread like wildfire. It was described pretty poetically as being like the sound of a great gong hung up in the sky. But after 6 long years of just pure agony, his journey takes this completely unexpected turn. A turn that would literally change the course of religious and philosophical history. And this is where it gets really interesting. His greatest insight? It didn't come from all that suffering, but from what happened right after it. Okay, so when Gautama finally comes to after collapsing, it hits him. A huge revelation. He realizes that true wisdom isn't found in punishing the body, but it's not found in indulging every single desire either. The real path, he figured out, was a middle way, a perfect balance between the two extremes he had just lived. Now, you have to understand, in the religious culture of ancient India, this was revolutionary. I mean, a real bombshell. It was pretty much universally believed that spiritual purity could only be achieved through extreme self-punishment. So his 5 followers, the guys who once admired his iron will, they saw him as a total quitter, a renegade who'd given up. And just like that, they abandoned him. So there he is, completely alone. Gautama sits down under this pipal tree, which would later become famous as the Bo tree, or the tree of knowledge. And he makes this solemn vow to himself. He would not get up, he wouldn't move, until he had finally truly understood the nature of life, of suffering, and the way out. And it was right there, under that tree, that he did it. He achieved enlightenment. He was now the Buddha. His next move? To go back into the world, not as some suffering ascetic, but as a teacher, ready to share what he learned with anyone who would listen. So, what was this core discovery? Well, it was radical. He taught that our suffering doesn't actually come from the outside world. It comes from our own minds, specifically from our ignorance about how reality works. See, we all walk around believing we have this permanent, solid self, right? And we spend our whole lives craving things to make that self happy. But the Buddha's big point was, that self is an illusion. It's just a temporary collection of thoughts, feelings, and sensations that are constantly changing. And this is another really key distinction to make. You know how a lot of mystics talk about a divine peace that's beyond our understanding? Well, Buddha taught something totally different. The peace he described, nirvana, isn't supernatural. It's a state of deep, deep calm that comes directly from a clear-sighted, rational understanding of reality, just as it is. So he didn't just leave it at that. He laid out a super practical way of life to actually achieve this understanding, and it's known as the Eightfold Path. And if you look at it, you'll see it's not a list of divine commandments you have to follow blindly. It's more like a guide for living, a guide filled with wisdom, ethical conduct, and mental discipline, all designed to help you see beyond that illusion of the self. But maybe the most radical part of his entire teaching wasn't even what he said. It was how he insisted people should approach his ideas. And this is what makes his legacy so powerful and enduring. What he established was really a philosophy, not a religion full of rigid rules. It's famous for its incredible tolerance. I mean, think about this. There's basically no record in history of Buddhists persecuting heretics. And at its very core is this quiet, steady appeal to your own individual reason. He was not asking for blind faith at all. In fact, this might be his most startling instruction of all. He essentially told people, hey, don't take my word for it. He urged everyone not to believe something just because it was written down in a book or because some teacher or priest told them so, and that included himself. The ultimate test of what's true, he taught, was your own direct experience and your own ability to reason. So when you boil it all down, the Buddha's legacy isn't a set of beliefs you're supposed to just accept on faith. It's more like an invitation to discover truth for yourself by testing it against your own life. And in our world today, which is just flooded with conflicting information and so many demands for blind belief, maybe this 2,500-year-old advice to just trust your own reason and your own experience is the most radical message of all.